to see, and even have names.
We haven't read it
But,
yet.
we're in, chapter 39, James. And we just started. We're in verses 1 through 4.
Oh, bless the Lord.
Good.
I hate being hurt.
But Job did recognize that he knew about these animals. That was no secret. He knew about them, and he realized that God had made these animals in quote unquote wonderfully well way. That and that's the only thing that God did. He did everything in fine fashion. All this brought Job to another truth. This being that he saw the world made by God operate with remarkable order and wisdom. Job noticed that. So we can get from all of this that God's teaching is now taking effect on Job. Job couldn't deny God's wisdom and his governing over all things, because there were things in Job's life that he couldn't understand. For example, like his crisis. He never understood that. What happened to him? And God never advances that information to him either, as we go in our later studies. Job then perhaps wondered, should he simply trust God, who does all of these things well and so marvelously? He's calculating in his brain. He then wonders, should he simply trust God, who does all of these things well and so marvelously? Now in verses 2 through 4, as it would be, God reminds Job of the arrangement. Verses 2 through 4, he reminds Job of the arrangement of growth and maturity of the mountain goat. Read it yourselves. He reminds Job of the growth and maturity of the mountain goat that God, had engineered for the natural order. Job did not design it or know much about it. As I mentioned, he knew, his knowledge was doubtful at best. Job I'm talking about now.
Yes, you know.
So, God has brought it down where he hoped that Job would understand better than he did all of the starry skies and whatnot. Now in verses 5 through 8, Rose, God asked Job if he knew about the wild, that word wild now, we just got the mountain goat, wild mountain goat. Now if he knew about the wild donkey, my. So Rose, if you'd read 5 through 8 for us.
Who let the wild donkey go free? Who untied his ropes? I gave him the wasteland as his home, the salt flats as his habitat. He laughs at the commotion in the town. He does not hear a driver shout. He ranges the hills for his pasture and searches for any green thing.
Okay, thank you. Here we see that Job had no knowledge of the facts of nature in these verses. You want to think about the wild donkey. He had even less power over the animals. These things belong to God only and not Job. All of these wild animals. We'll talk about dominion in a little while. Man does have dominion over some of these animals, but God controls them. He brings them into the world, and then he takes them out at his leisure. The donkey is one of the most admired animals of the Old Testament, and it is. I wrote that and say that because it was a wonderful, the domestic donkey was a wonderful thing to have around. Why? Because you could use it for a pack animal.
Takes your herd.
You could ride on it, pardon? Your transportation.
Takes the herd to the herd too, before the
But But like most animals that size, they can be, mighty difficult to take care of, feed, water, and that thing. We're talking about a wild donkey here. And this creature was admired for both its freedom and its ability to survive under harsh conditions. The mountains and were his pasture, and his searches after anything green to eat. That's how he lived. That satisfied his appetite, green grass. God knew that how the wild donkey lived and was provided for. Job had no idea. So we move on from there. In verses 9 through 12, Carol, God asked Job if he knew about the wild ox. So if you would read those few verses, Carol.
Is the wild ox willing to serve you? Will he spend the night at your manger? Can you bind him in the furrow with ropes, or will he harrow the valleys after you? Will you depend on him because his strength is great, and will you leave to him your labor? Do you have faith in him that he will return your grain and gather it to your threshing floor?
Thank you. Here we see that, of course, Job was smarter than a wild ox. There's no doubt. No one would doubt this. He's smarter than a wild ox. Yet, the wild ox would not serve him. No way. Job was lacking in both knowledge of and mastery over the natural world. The wild ox was a colossal animal, also known as the auroch. I asked my geniuses, the Bowen boys, to get me some paperwork on the auroch, meaning, the same thing as the wild ox, but some people call it the auroch, A-U-R-O-C-H. It was the mightiest of all of the hoof beast animals, the auroch. Similar in size to our bison that roamed the western plains at one time. Only this thing had long, curved horns for protection. The auroch did, or the wild oxen. It was the standard of strength in the Old Testament. And it's extinct now, of course.
Yeah.
The auroch, the wild ox, is extinct. Now, I went to some trouble here. James, if you would,
Yes, sir.
go to Numbers chapter 24, verse 8, and hold.
No, yes, sir.
Jessica, handle Deuteronomy chapter 33 and hold.
28, 8 and 28?
No,
24. Chapter
Numbers 24, 8,
24.
Deuteronomy 33, 17, Carol, Psalm 29, 6. Christie, 34, 7. Now, I look back, and these are the places.
I'm sorry. Psalms?
Isaiah 34, 7.
Isaiah.
I looked back in the Bible to see how many times I could find this wild ox mentioned. Because I don't remember, or didn't remember mentioning it in our studies. The ox, yes. The donkey, yes. But the wild ox, I couldn't remember. Now, I found it, and it was mentioned several times in the Old Testament. I didn't go to the New, I stayed in the Old, and it's mentioned. And it's mentioned in these places that I just gave. So let's, someone read 24:8, please.
God brought him forth out of Egypt. He was as if it were the strength of a unicorn, a wild ox.
That's it. See, so we know that they were in Egypt.
Yeah. He shall eat up the nations, his enemies, and shall break their bones and pierce them through with his arrows.
Okay, thank you. Let's read Deuteronomy 33:17.
In majesty he is like a firstborn bull. His horns are the horns of a wild ox. With them he will gore the nations, even those at the ends of the earth. Such are the 10,000s of Ephraim, such are the thousands of...
We're learning a lot about the wild ox right now. Psalm 29:6.
He makes Lebanon to skip like a calf and Syrian like a young wild ox.
Mhm. Isaiah 34:7.
And the wild oxen will fall with them, the bull calves and the great bulls. Their land will be drenched with blood, and the dust will be soaked with fat.
Thank you. Well, you can say that out of the wild blue. If you know what you're looking for, you can find it in the Bible.
Yeah.
All of these different references to the wild ox, and each one of them that I found was in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament. Now these wild oxen, they roamed the plains of Europe for many years. They roamed the plains of Italy and the mountains of Italy. Also Greece, also Egypt, also Mesopotamia. They were all over the place, to include Canaan. So they were plentiful back in the early biblical days before they became extinct. I was not able to find out exactly when they became extinct, but I did get the year 1600 in those years. But they roamed everywhere, in Europe and whatnot. Now, in verses 13 through 18, Christy, God asked Job if he understood the ostrich. Now this I thought was a rather, if you can get some humanism out of the book of Job, here it is. Here it is, this ostrich. Now, go ahead and read it, please.
The wings of the ostrich flap joyfully, though they cannot compare with the wings and feathers of the stork. She lays her eggs on the ground and lets them warm in the sand, unmindful that a foot may crush them, that some wild animal may trample them. She treats her young harshly as if they were not hers. She cares not that her labor was in vain. For God did not endow her with wisdom or give her a share of good sense. Yet when she spreads her feathers to run, she laughs at the horse and the rider.
Well, that's the truth, too.
That's awesome.
What we see here is this wild ostrich will, of course, lay her eggs, and then for all practical purposes, she leaves them. She leaves them in the sand for the heat of the sun and other animals to come find them and eat them, this, that, and the other. And if they are born, she treated them very harshly. Now, here we see that God spoke of the proudly waving wings of the flightless ostrich. This bird didn't fly.
But she was fast on her feet.
Like a bullet. Perhaps Job could explain why a winged creature like this is flightless. And all in all, the reason is that the pinions and the feathers are not designed to fly. The pinions that hold the feathers in place on its little wings are not designed to fly. Flap, yes, because when this bird runs, she can run.
Aerodynamics.
Yes, and she can squeak and squall, and she's very funny looking running. How many of you seen an ostrich run? Yeah. You know,
I've heard them like they go,
I've heard
when
they're
they're
mean
asleep.
too.
What, Pat?
I said, I've heard that ostrich are mean.
Yeah.
Oh,
And they can hurt when they peck.
I
maybe
think
them feathers a
so.
little bit more from running and for slapping.
Yeah.
They fight good.
Here's what I thought about it. This passage I thought was remarkable in describing the ostrich. It is the first real human in the book of Job, however. leave it to God to force a smile out of Job at a time when Job was so intense about his misery. God reminded Job that he is the dispenser of wisdom. God reminded Job that he is the dispenser of wisdom, and God gives or withholds as he pleases. It was through strange examples like the ostrich that God taught and yes, entertained Job. An ostrich. Is an ostrich similar to another bird that is popular here in America now?
Emu. Yeah, I seen one of them soldiers on Rock House Road one time. I don't know how it got there.
They were
It was a
around
ranch.
here. The Tom Watson property had several of them there at one time, the emu.
Oh, I read in Jimmy Swaggart's notes, it says it's as fast or faster than a horse
Yes,
when it runs. That's
I'm telling
awesome.
you, the horse can't keep up with it, and then he certainly can't make the changes in direction that this animal has. Vic, 19 through 25, God asked Job if he understood the horse. If he understood the horse. Now Job should understand the horse, don't you think?
I would think.
Do you give the horse his strength, or clothe his neck with a flowing mane? Do you make him leap like a locust, striking terror with his proud snorting? He paws fiercely, rejoicing in his strength, and charges into the fray. He laughs at fear, afraid of nothing. He does not shy away from the sword. The quiver rattles against his side, along with the flashing spear and lance. In frenzied excitement, he eats up the ground. He cannot stand still when the trumpet sounds. At the blast of the trumpet, he snorts. Ah! He catches the scent of a battle from afar, the shout of commanders and the battle cry.
We know
When
for
did
years,
Jesus come
if they
back?
go back into early biblical times, the horse was present. And
Revelation,
it
come
was
back
used to
on.
ride on, go to battle with, and this, that, and the other. Like many, Job was impressed with the strength of the horse. I'm impressed with the strength of the horse. It's a magnificent animal. Yet, he had no strength to give the horse. That's important right there in that very first verse. Job had no strength to give the horse. The horse had its own strength. And it came from God and not from Job or anyone else. The horse's strength, agility. In verses 20 through to 25, we see here that Job could give no explanation. This is Job now. Give no explanation for the warrior nature of the horse, which gallops against reason without question. It gallops against reason and its own self-interest. How many times have we seen movies involving the horse?
Oh, Spirits. Spirit of the Cimarron. It's
Yeah.
that little horse, he's a wild horse.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
But they gallop into battle. They run races. They do a lot of things. Got tremendous strength and agility. The horses do.
There was a
Did you
movie
see that
called
movie
War
called
Horse.
War Horse?
Oh, I was just
Oh,
thinking
I
about that.
love that.
Yeah.
I never got to see
Excellent
that.
movie.
Yeah,
It is an
it's a
excellent
wonderful
movie.
movie.
But it's very representative of what he's saying here. I mean, they just don't resist in battle.
Yeah.
They don't have no fear. If you turn around guns, they're good with it, man. You turn them to go off on guns.
Well, what got me was, and it's in our Bible, it gallops against reason and its own self-interest. In other words, it galloped into battle without question. with his master on his back.
Jesus right in on.
He took a bow, a quiver in the sides, no problem, and kept on going. This was the horse is a magnificent animal. Let's just put it that way. We see here that Job could give no explanation for this horse, and which gallops against reason and its own self-interest. I'm a little bit taken back that Job could not explain a little bit about the horse to God. Or perhaps God just pushed it by in passing and they went on to another subject. In verses 26 through 30, Sarah, God asked Job if he understands the hawk or the eagle. Now, those are two wild birds right there that anyone will have difficulty understanding, to include Job. Please, Sarah. That's verses 26 through 30.
Is it by your understanding that the hawk soars and spreads his wings toward the south? Is it at your command that the eagle mounts up and makes his nest on high? On the rock he dwells and makes his home on the rocky crag and stronghold. From there he spies out the prey. His eyes behold it from far away. His young ones suck up blood, and where the slain are, there is he.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, I like eagles.
You know, we have hawks and eagles here in our area, and they're plentiful. Not so much the eagle as the hawk, but the hawks, even in the city around the city of Thomson, you better not put your chihuahua in the backyard.
Or the front yard.
We have eagles, we do have eagles in Thompson, I checked it out. I found some eagle feathers on Pine Street.
Yes, and they are prevalent, but more so at Clark Hill or the lake up there. You will see those beautiful birds sitting in a dead pine tree or something, eyeballing that water. And they're looking for a perch to make its fur smooth, which will probably be its last. I mean, these are smart birds. They take good care of themselves. They take good care of their young. And they're very intelligent. And, you know, that's one reason I said the 101st Airborne Division took the eagle as its insignia. How brilliant. How brilliant.
I'm glad American flag is represented by the eagle and not the turkey.
Yeah.
People think we tie a turkey.
Now, as it would be, God wanted Job to be astonished at the wildness of it all. Even though God had given man, here it is, dominion over fish of the sea, birds of the air, cattle on the earth, and every creeping thing. If you would, Pat, turn to Genesis 1, verse 26 and read it. Genesis 1. I just didn't pull this out of my own head.
Genesis 1, what?
Verse 26.
Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness.
Is this verse 26?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
May I continue?
Sure.
You are authorized.
Let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth.
And this makes for a good discussion, even though we may not know a whole lot about these animals that we've been studying through God's Word. We have dominion over them because we can get in charge in a hurry with our knowledge, our wisdom, and what we have. We can endanger all of these animals, ourselves as human beings.
Yeah.
But God gives us dominion over them.
Well, God gave us that. He gave us that. That's not anything we did ourselves.
No, you ain't under ourselves too. And we do have authority and command, you know, when we pray and ask I mean, even for the animals, we can command Jesus Christ. A trumpet goes off, that's a standard charge of the
Yes.
Praise the Lord.
Mhm. But I wanted to make sure that we all understood that for all practical purposes, we as humans have dominion over all of these different animals. It doesn't
He
mean we
also
know a lot
wanted
about
Job
them
to
or can
know
handle them.
that he was the only one that could do it.
Pardon?
He also wanted Job to know that he was the only one that could do it, that
Right.
God was.
Yes. I suspect that Job really thought in his own mind that he had dominion over these things. He could go hit them with an arrow or something and for meals, but I'm not too sure about that, because Job has his servants and he had all those cattle and all of those goats and all those sheep, thousands of them. He was the richest man at that time in the Far East.
Well, all of that was from God.
Yeah. Now, even with dominion over these wild creatures, man did not make or sustain them. That's key. Even with dominion that we have over these wild creatures, man did not make or sustain them. With so little authority over nature, could Job expect to have control over the events of his life? Probably not. He tried hard to have control over the events of his life, but he couldn't expect it to be there for him always. In fact, God took control over the events of his life, and of all things, he did it with the devil's assistance. Now,
Maybe he was trying to show himself right, because he didn't even have to, but he showed us a test. After the passing of the test, it was the blessing.
yes,
But here's the test.
absolutely. Job was equally powerless to explain the eagle. Job didn't know much about the eagle. He didn't know much about the hawk either. To explain the eagle and its ways, much less to command it to do this, that, or the other. The eagle didn't take commands from human beings. Now, God was not being harsh with Job all during this questioning, especially when one considers God's words with those of Job's accusers, his friends. Now, they were harsh to Job, but not God. His accusers were harsh because they thought Job had sinned, as we know. But God did not even take that into consideration, because he knew better. He knew what Job's problem was and was about to take care of it in the next couple of books. God did not come to judge Job.